Zamfara traditional rulers threw their weight behind President Buhari as the APC campaign team receives warm reception in the state.
Coalition of aggrieved Atiku support group formally declares for Buhari.
32nd ordinary session of the African Union opens with African leaders' collective zeal to tackle the challenges of refugees and internally displaced persons in Africa.
And 5 days to the much anticipated 2019 presidential elections. Good Morning Nigeria today focuses on ways of preventing electoral violence in Nigeria.
As we officially begin our countdown to the 2019 general elections this weekend, it became imperative that our focus this first day of Good Morning Nigeria is on mitigating electoral violence as the political temperature continues to rise.
Yes, Kirian, you're absolutely right. Now, electoral violence has been one of the biggest threats to Nigeria's democratic future. And unfortunately, Nigeria isn't a stranger to electoral violence. We all recall what happened in the course of the First Republic and also what happened in 1983 that ultimately led to the collapse of the Second Republic. And since 1999, of course, the country has witnessed several rounds of violence in the various cycles of election.
All right, you are indeed right, Kingsley, because Nigerians should never have had such experience. Although politicians have signed peace accords and promised to work with INEC for violence-free elections this February, it seems people are not swayed by these assurances. The stories of violence in the past show that as the stakes in the elections become higher in Nigeria, politicians become more desperate. And desperation, of course, sparks violence. Do you blame Nigerians for being skeptical?
Well, Kirian, some persons would answer that question by saying certainly not. Now, the political temperature is rising steadily by the day with verbal sparring amongst the political parties. In fact, the U.S. recently threatened severe sanctions against anyone who makes comments, that is to say politicians, that would incite violence capable of disrupting the peaceful conduct of the elections.
And if you remember, Kingsley, we have touched on this issue of electoral violence in the past on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, the importance of peaceful and credible elections cannot be overstated. Now, we are talking about this again, and because of to sensitize Nigerians more on this and remind them of the dangers of electoral violence to the country and democracy.
That's right, Kiriam. Now, it's important that all stakeholders this weekend and the other elections work together to support INEC in conducting elections that truly reflect the will and aspirations of the electorate. And
we all know that if the atmosphere for the peaceful election is not created, this election will fall short of the expectations of peace-loving Nigerians. So how do we identify and understand the drivers of electoral violence, and how can it be contained? How can stakeholders use this knowledge to mitigate the problem of electoral violence? And now, how should Nigerians peacefully protect their electoral mandate?
Well, Kirian, as we mentioned earlier, this first conversation that we're having this week on Good Morning Nigeria is on these issues and several other connected matters that may arise. And indeed, you're aware that a series of conferences and workshops and meetings have been taking place, particularly since the close of last year, right up until this moment, as to how the country can ensure the peaceful elections with a concomitant impact on all other matters arising.
And again, Kingsley, with all those conferences, it does seem that they're not being reflected in the behavioral pattern of party members and followers. Just over the weekend, there was a clash at a day between APC supporters and the PDP supporters. And it was so deadly because so many cars were burnt down.
That's right. It's not just in Abuja, elsewhere in the country. I mean, there have been reports of clashes. But what is significant is that it is the followers rather than the leaders themselves that are engaging in fisticuffs. And you just have to ask yourself, what is all of this in aid of? The elections will come, winners will emerge, and of course,
losers will emerge as well.
Of course, there will be losers, and there will be another round of elections 4 years from now. It's on that note we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network. That is the Nigerian Television Authority. We are right here at the Abuja headquarters studios. I am Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Nigerian Umaya. It's always good to have you with us on the program. And I hope you are also looking forward to the complementary segments of the program, such as the newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. For now, let's join Usman Ali for this morning's news. Hello, Usman.
Good morning. Thanks, Kirian and Kingsley. Gusau, the capital of Zamfara State, was agog as party supporters trooped out en masse to give the APC presidential campaign team a befitting reception. President Muhammad Buhari has appealed to the people to be law-abiding and support whoever emerges as the party's governorship candidate in the state.
You will have railway from Katsina to Guzo, from Guzo to Sokoto, from Sokoto to Kebbi.
And the Nigerian people will never allow anybody whose primary purpose is self-enrichment or enrichment of his family members.
APC!
And still in Zamfara, traditional rulers in the state have thrown their weight behind President Muhammad Buhari as he seeks re-election to take Nigeria to the next level. This was when the president paid homage on members of the State Council of Emirs and Chiefs as part of his campaign tour of the state.
Rulers and the president are solidly behind you and praying fervently for your success in the coming election, inshallah. Our love for you is informed by your passion for justice, anti-corruption, equality, and fairness in governance.
It means that traditionally we are losing grip on our environment. In terms of security, the responsibility falls on your shoulders. Technically, not the police, not the military, because of neighborhood knowledge. You know more than I do the improvement we made. We have to eliminate some of the villains, including one who named himself Buhari Daji or Buhari whatever. Buhari Center is stronger than Buhari Daji.
Meanwhile, less than 1 week to the presidential election, coalition of aggrieved Atiku support group has formally declared support for the re-election of President Muhammad Buhari. Receiving them in Abuja, Chairman Central Working Committee of the APC Women and Youth Presidential Campaign Council, Mohammed Buba Marwa, described their action as timely.
To formally declare support for President Muhammad Buhari re-election is for national interest, and his ability to rejig the governance system that he occasioned with corruption activities under the 16 years misrule.
To campaign from door to door, taking full advantage of what you know of the government and performance of President Buhari.
President Muhammad Buhari says that Nigeria holds another general elections on February 16, just like 4 years ago when the country experienced its first democratic transfer of power to the opposition since 1999. The vote in a few days will be no less significant. He emphasized that as president, he has tried to judiciously exercise the trust vested in him to combat the problems of corruption, insecurity, and inequitable economy. All he says are important, but corruption, however, stands above the others as both a cause and aggravator of the rest. A policy program that does not have fighting corruption at its core, President Muhammad Buhari says, is destined to fail, stressing that the battle against graft must be the base for the security of the country economic development, provision of decent infrastructure, and educating the next generation. Corruption, he emphasized, corrodes the trust on which the idea of community is founded, because one rule for the few and another for everyone else is unacceptable to anyone working honestly. President Buhari noted that each time the enablers are let in, as they have been in the past, the greed of those they collude with grows. His administration, he says, has closed the door on them, but unfortunately, there still remain individuals who are willing to open windows. Concrete progress, he says, has been made, but there is still much to do, adding that the repatriated hundreds of millions of dollars stored away in foreign banks have been transparently deployed on infrastructural projects and used to directly empower the poorest in the society. The president added that victory over corruption is difficult but not impossible, as he cautioned Nigerians on the need to follow due process and exercise restraint, ensuring allegation never takes the place of evidence. The 32nd Ordinary Session of the African Union has opened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with African leaders expressing collective zeal to deal with the challenges of refugees, internally displaced persons and migrants. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyama, is leading Nigeria's delegation to the summit.
Refugees probably in the world today on the African continent. So we're going to be fully engaged with that in terms of trying to look at the root causes and to see what we can all do as countries to address that challenge.
And now talking security. The Air Task Force of Operation Dramikia has intensified the bombardment of armed bandits hideouts in Zamfara State and environs. Director of Public Relations and Information, Air Commodore Ibikule Daramola, indicates that the airstrikes were preceded by days of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance missions initiated based on credible human intelligence reports, which led to identification of several camps being used by the bandits to launch attacks against innocent civilians. Air interdiction missions were conducted at locations in Rugu Forest south of Gurbin Baure, where some armed bandits were being assembled by a logistic truck parked near the compound hideout. The Air Task Force dispatched a Nigerian Air Force attack helicopter and an Alpha jet to engage the bandits' trucks and compound. The helicopters trapped the moving truck in successive strikes, mobilizing it and neutralizing its occupants. Valuable election materials, including over 5,900 voter cards, have been destroyed following a fire incident that engulfed the INEC office in Kwafang local government area of Plateau State. Head Voter Education and Publicity INEC Plateau State, Osaratin Imarihedobo, who confirmed the incident, told NTA News that although the incident was a major setback in the election preparation, it will, however, not stop the conduct of the elections in the area.
So the card readers are not there. I've learned, I've heard, maybe seen some social media saying that the card readers have been burnt. Not even a single card reader had been sent to compound. Nothing is going to stop the election from holding there. The only challenge is that there are people who are there who lose their PVCs, about 5,987 that is born. That is where the challenge is. What it means is that they may not be able to get PVCs to vote.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kinsley after the break.
You are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. So many entrepreneurs are calling for the introduction of a national skills policy, which they say will drive the nation's economy. Let's hear more of this from Joy Uzo.
It's good to have you join us on Business News. Chairman, Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Adetukumbo Kayode, has called for a national skills policy that will sharpen the skills amongst youths and address challenges of unemployment. He said government can effectively realize this by going into partnership with the private sector. Mr. Adetukumbo emphasized that the economy of any country is always driven by vibrant youths.
We want everybody to take skills seriously. We will work with our partners in the private sector and government to create a national skills policy, because it does not exist. Why? So many agencies of government want to control it. We have to understand that it's not the control that matters, it is the value you add to it. We create a national skills policy, create opportunities. The private sector actually needs to do more. Rather than waiting for government, the private sector needs to do more.
And to insurance, research has shown that Nigerians are the highest out-of-pocket spenders on health issues, primarily due to the absence of insurance cover. Kolo Muhammad takes a look at issues militating against sufficient insurance cover in Nigeria. Let's see it.
As a means of protection from financial loss, insurance is a form of risk management primarily used to hedge against the risk of a contingent or uncertain loss. The brilliance of its function notwithstanding, insurance is not sufficiently harnessed in this part of the world. This is due to a number of reasons.
Firstly, I think there is the notion in other countries whereby the companies where their staff are, the companies themselves pay for the insurance of the health insurance for their staff, property insurance and all of that for their staff. But here, Nigerians are most likely put in a position whereby they have to pay for their insurance by themselves from their hard-earned labor.
For some people, insurance where they live does not cover ample lives indices, and so people get to not have enough cover most times.
Because insurance should be the most critical element in our everyday living. Okay? Because that's what it is, insured. You should be insured against everything. And insurance becomes even more efficacious when you are now running, what you might be calling a Tyndall economy, where life is becoming short, life is becoming brutish. Okay? Again, insurance is supposed to be that gateway to rights and privileges.
I don't know why Nigeria is not concerned by taking care of insurance. Insurance is very, very important. Like where I'm working, where everybody is there very, very sure, even the car or a person that they are sure, because we know what we are doing.
A properly harnessed insurance policy means prosperity for a nation and its citizens. In Abuja, Kolo Muhammad, NTA News.
Thank you, Kolo. We now take a brief review of activities on the equities market for the previous week, where a total turnover of 1.894 billion shares worth 26.884 billion naira in 19,213 deals were traded by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 2.92% to close the week at 31,529.92 and 11.758 trillion naira respectively. Similarly, all other indices finished higher, with the exception of the NSE Industrial Goods Index that depreciated by 0.66%. The financial services industry measured by volume led the activity chart with 1.498 billion shares valued at 19.724 billion naira traded in 12,581 deals, thus contributing 79.10% and 73.37% to the total equity turnover volume and value respectively. And with that, we wrap business news. Many thanks for your time. I'm Joy Uzo. Do have a great week.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next on Good Morning Nigeria, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
And Municipal Reviewer Bayo Altayabi is already seated here with us in the studio. It's good to see you, Bayo.
Thank you, Kirian. Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you. Hope you had a restful weekend.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's begin paper's review this morning by going to the front page of the Punch newspaper. Of course, there are political stories right on the front page with the lead saying PDP reacts as Buhari says corruption threatens February 16 poll, with the rider President and Atiku to sign fresh pact on poll outcome on Wednesday. That's in greater detail on page 2. And the 4 photographs on the front page of the Punch newspaper show, one, the collection of PVCs. That's the first photograph there in Lagos to the left, and the next one, of course, shows the scene of a fire incident at an INEC office in one of the local government areas on Plateau State. The 2 photographs, top and bottom, show the scene of that fire incident. The other photograph, that's the one left and below, is the scene of the PVC sorting and collection centers in Abuja. Now, beside the photographs there, you have 4 headlines. Arms scam. Federal government fails to probe Buhari's NSA and minister. That's on page 10. Overcrowding. 9 slump at Atiku's rally in Kano. Mother and National Hospital Abuja disagree over teenager's death. That's on pages 4 and 5. Ex-military governor David Ejo dies at 87. That's on page 10. And very quickly, above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, we have 4 headlines there. Don't forget Leah Sharibu, family begs federal government and international community. That's page 59. Post, Nigeria must avoid Venezuelan nightmare, says Akinyemi. Olaji Akinyemi is former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Buhari's visit, that's the kicker. Confusion in Ogun as Amosun and Oshoba make parallel plans. That's page 7. On page 36, 3.4 billion naira debt. FIRS to sell 52 firms' properties. Again, that's on page 36. Kirian.
All right, let's turn to the Daily Independent newspaper, and let's start from top to bottom. And so there are stories above the nameplate of the Daily Independent. Let's begin. Atiku shuts down Kano, promises to revitalize commerce and agriculture. 25 slump at rally ground. Page 41 has details of that story. And then fire destroys ballot boxes, PVCs, voter register in INEC office. Page 41. Death toll rises to 10 in Anambra petrol tanker fire. With the rider, Abga blames it on wrong parking by motorists. It's on page 4. Now, below the nameplate, and of course, the lead story this morning on Daily Independent is a former finance minister, Adeosho, under probe over alleged corrupt practices. With the rider, EFCC Presidential Investigation Panel on her trail. And the photograph, the Daily Independent, is that of the PDP's campaign yesterday in Kano. And below that, we have money bags threaten February 16 polls. Buhari cries out. With the 3 riders, 2019 elections, Nigeria's most dreaded, says Bolaji Akinyemi. Don't panic. Federal government reassures Nigerians and foreigners. APC summons special meeting to finalize a strategy. Banditry, I am disappointed at you, Buhari tells Zamfara chiefs. Page 2 is where you get that story. And then Leah Sharibu not dead, says the federal government. And at the very bottom of the Daily Independence elections, anxiety as Nigeria enters crucial week is on page 13. Let's bring in Bayo now for further analysis.
Yes, indeed. The Dapchi school girl, still held by the insurgent who captured her, was reported dead. The Minister of Information has denied that the information is sheer fake news. He made that pronouncement yesterday. The father of the girl says he was not aware his daughter has been killed by the group that vows to use her only as a slave. Tribune reports that news around the whole of Northeast had raised false alarm that the girl has been killed, but there was no confirmation about how she was killed or any pronouncement from her captors. Her mother, at that point in time, was on her way from Jos to Abuja going to attend an ECWA conference. The father has enjoined on government to put more effort in ensuring her release as they have constantly promised. All the death that has actually occurred is that of Major General David Ejo, retired. He was the first military governor of the then Midwest provinces, which later on became Bendel and now comprises Edo and Delta State. He was military governor from 1966 to 67. In fact, it was during the invasion of Benin by the Biafran forces that he fled Benin. Some say he left on the bicycle. All of a sudden, he surfaced in Lagos to escape at that time. He later on became the chief of staff until the government then was overthrown in 1975. He died at the age of 87. The other story that is making the round are on the political campaigns trail. President Muhammadu Buhari, while campaigning in Lagos over the weekend, said that he's been entrusted with the public property, and as such, anybody who has responsibility for public property will account for it. He was speaking at a rally at the Teslim Balogun Stadium in Lagos, and he said his administration will imprison those who had looted the nation's treasury. He promised, if re-elected, to ensure that his promises he made in 2015, that of ensuring security, economy, and fighting corruption, will continue. At the Teslim Balogun Stadium, where the rally held, the leader, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, leader of the party, said Michelin, Dunlop, and others left the country, and this was because of corruption. And he said now they want to come back and take over our money and take it to Europe. The party chairman, Comrade Adams Oshiomhole, who handed over the flag of the party to Babajide Sanwo-Olu and his running mate, Obafemi Hamza, also said that the APC is back to restore Nigeria. At the courtesy call on the Oba of Lagos, President Muhammadu Buhari was presented a copy of Quran by the Oba of Lagos. In Kano, the PDP presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar says he will restore Kano to the lost glory of as a hub of commerce, industry, and agriculture if elected. He told the mammoth crowd at the Sani Abacha Stadium in Kano that he also promised to ease all the problems surrounding holy pilgrimage to Holy Land. National chairman of the PDP, Uche Secondos, told the mammoth crowd, you can see Kano has fallen. Kano is 100% PDP. He charged security agencies to be neutral in their duties before, during, and after the election. Senator Rabi Musa Kwankwaso was also there, and they also paid a courtesy call on the Emir of Kano. Meanwhile, the National Judicial
but I have that story.
Yes.
Let me take it first, and then we'll come to you. Still on the elections, this is coming from Daily Sun newspaper. It's a story beside the nameplate of the Sun newspaper. Elections, that's the kicker. Clinton and Commonwealth scribe to witness second peace deal in Abuja. That's on page 11. And below that, of course, you have the countdown. 2019, Nigeria votes 6 days to February 16th. And then you have the two stories there, page 12 and page 6. Game over for President, Atiku declares in Kano. Why Nigerians should re-elect me. That's according to President Buhari. And corruption threat to next elections, says President. Now, the lead story has a kicker as NJC ratifies recommendation today. Onoge to go, Mohammed stays. With two riders, CUPP alleges arm twisting and pressure mounts on Apex Court and INEC over Rivers APC candidates. Then you have the story there on the David Ejo as well as the Leah Sharibu, which Bayo has already discussed. And IGP orders tight security around INEC facilities. And the photograph there shows the presidential candidate of the PDP addressing a campaign rally in Kano yesterday. 10 vehicles bumped as APC, PDP supporters clash in Abuja. That's on page 5.
Yes, I think we should just run through the rest so that you can return for that analysis. Now, the Nigerian pilot, let's go to Nigerian pilot. Of course, the stories there have been mentioned in other newspapers. It's fake news. Leah Sharibu not dead, Lai Mohammed clarifies. We saved $550 million after shutting out ghost employees, says the federal government. Is on page 6. And of course, Buhari Razi Salam, the lead story on Nigerian pilot, with 3 riders. The looters want to undermine elections, says laundered money being funneled into buying votes. Now, you can't pontificate on graft, says PDP. It's on page 8. Well, of course, we've seen the photographs of the same rally of yesterday in other papers. Now, at the bottom of the Nigerian pilot, NJC decides today on Onogen and Mohammed. And now AU re-elects Nigeria into Peace and Security Council. And then Duke Yawoshe rejects SDP's adoption of Buhari. I'm afraid of 2019 polls, Professor Bolaji Akemi. Bye.
Right. Let's start with the National Judicial Council. They are expected to reconvene today, and they are expected to deliberate over the responses that came from the petitions to the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria and the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed. The 2 justices are said to have actually provided their responses. However, in the case of the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, he is reported to have told the Judicial Service Commission that he is not a judicial officer. The Code of Conduct chairman is reported to have said that he did not subscribe to the oath of office of judicial officers. He only subscribed to an oath of office. He also added that as he's an appointee of the president and he is responsible only to the president. The members of the Code of Conduct Tribunal at the time of inauguration did not take the oath of judicial officers. The petition about him had alleged that he violated his oath, the judicial oath of office. He also cited a situation that a letter written by Chief Justice Mahmoud Mohammed, as he then was in May 2015, asking that Code of Conduct Tribunal members should stop referring to themselves as justices or justices. He cited paragraph 15, 1 and 2 of the 5th schedule of the Constitution to support that assertion.
All right, now let's go to the editorial, and it's taken from Al Jazeera News. It's on the security and 2019 elections. It says Nigeria is at the verge of a fresh dispensation as it goes for general elections in a few days. Expectedly, it has fallen on our laps, and we are trapped and drenched in the many questions relating to insecurity and the many difficult utterances of stakeholders across the divides, thus making it appear there is an all-out war.
Yes, voting is a civic responsibility. It's a civil activity, not a civil war. However, because of posturing by politicians and their supporters, and also because of the high tension of the stake at hand, the atmosphere has become very charged. It is in this regard that the international community had also increasingly have been alerting and sending appeals for peaceful elections. Some have even threatened and said they will wield the beast in the event of anybody they find to have conducted anything they describe as untoward happening in Nigeria. U.S. government says it is sending a former President Clinton to come to Nigeria. Like Kingsley read earlier on, they are going to be part of the another pact that will be signed on Wednesday about the outcome of the polls. The police has always assured that they will provide security and people should feel free and go to vote on the days of election. However, there are concerns, particularly from political parties who are raising issues with INEC, raising issues with security, and therefore heightening the tendency for members of the public to have this fear heightened. Election is a civic duty, and it behoves on all of us to conduct ourselves peacefully so that we can all select the leaders we want in a peaceful atmosphere.
Very well stated, Bayo. Thank you very much for being with us. See you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be another day.
Okay. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with peaceful elections and Nigeria going forward.
And now, we thank you for staying with us up to this moment on Good Morning Nigeria today. Now, before we go into our conversation on mitigating election violence, now let's watch what correspondent Oyemi Ajayi put together. He asked a cross-section of Nigerians what they think of electoral violence and advice on how to mitigate it.
the youth in particular should be given well-organized orientation. Because if you are well informed about the electoral process, there is no point for you going into electoral violence. In terms of people conceding to the election,
the only thing that they should do, my advice, is to bring soldiers. They can deploy soldiers to the police zone.
The only advice I have for Nigerians is for everybody to come out and exercise their civil rights, because we can't be at the side complaining that things is not moving well when at the day of election everybody will be indoors. And I feel that the time has come for us to wake up. Let people not be intimidated.
Well, in respect of security issue, I think the police should wake up, do their possible best. All security agencies, they have a vital role to play. And in respect of the politician as well, they should not go to the extent of maybe bribing people or bringing up thugs to ring election.
If they can make the election to be free and fair without any fight or without inciting any hateful speech, like they always say that hateful speech incite fight. If there's no hateful speech, then the country can move forward or the election can go great. But when there is hate speech and all the politicians, all the aspirants did not advise their followers on what to do and how to go about it, when they advise their followers wrongly, they'll be violent. But if they can advise their followers to do the right thing at the right time, then there'll be no violence.
As a youth, what you need to do, have your voter's card. On the day of election, go to the voting ground, you understand, cast your vote and go back home. Wait for the outcome of the election.
All right, thank you very much, Oyeyemi Ajayi, for that brief vox pop there. Some Nigerians expressing their views on election violence. We have guests with us in the studios to discuss this issue. First, we'd like to welcome the Police Force Public Relations Officer, Assistant Commissioner of Police, Frank Mba. ACP Mba, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, also here with us in the studios, regular face, the others are in fact more regular faces on Good Morning Nigeria. First, we'd like to welcome Ezenwa Nwagu, who is Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Ezenwa, delighted to have you with us on the program.
Good morning, and good morning, Nigerians.
And of course, Kabir Adamu is here with us this morning. He's a security risk management expert. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the program.
Thank you.
And Abiola Akilde Afolabi, I hope I got that right. She is the chairperson, Transition Monitoring Group. We thank you for being here with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here too. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, let's especially welcome Dr. Abiola Akilde Afolabi. We always have her from our Lagos network studios, but she's here with us in the Abuja studios today. So good to have you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, 5 days to the first of the series of elections that Nigeria is having in this year's general elections. That's to say the presidential and National Assembly elections. So we've had issues reported with regard to the lead-up, but of course, is there cause to worry about likely disruption of the peace going into the elections? Let's begin with the election observers and monitors that we've had who are veterans in this business, beginning, of course, with Dr. Abiola.
Well, from what we have been saying, yes, there's a cause for worry, there's cause for concern. And also, if we look at the historicity from the beginning of the First Republic, we have always been having one form of electoral violence during election. Electoral violence that, as we know, is a cycle thing, so it's not something that is restricted only to election day. It's from pre-election period to election, then to post-election period. And so oftentimes you see a lot of things happening, before the elections. And from what we've been saying, particularly during primaries, in this country we have witnessed a lot of violence in several places, across the country. And after the primary, during campaign period, we have also seen several things that should, worry us going towards the election. For example, even in Abuja, about a week ago, the INEC office was burned. In Plateau, we have had the same problem. And we have also seen convoys of political parties being attacked. We've seen a lot of fights even in Lagos and some other places. So if seeing all these things actually give you a lot of concern towards the 2019 general elections.
Well, a lot of concern indeed. And now, considering the strategies put in place by the security apparatus of the country, led by the police, is there any cause for alarm as we move into this election? I'd like Frank Mbata to come in here.
Well, I wouldn't want to use the word alarm, but I would say there's cause for concerns. If I say alarm, then I'll be taking it to the extreme. But there are cause for concern, and of course, those concerns are part of the factors that will be driving what we do as a law enforcement agency. If you look at election violence, you will understand that they are not just violence for the purpose of violence. They are not just they are a means to an end. So you find that election violence, for example, people carry out election violence because they want to rig elections, or they want to win elections by crook or by crook. Sometimes they carry out violence because they claim they want to protect their votes or protect their victories. Sometimes they carry out violence because they want to protest against what they could call flaws in the electoral systems. They want to express their anger. They want to express their frustrations. Then there are those who carry out violence simply as an end in itself. They are spoilers. They just want to cause mischief. And then, okay, you also have criminal elements that are just waiting by, and they want to take advantage of the charged atmosphere. So sometimes you might find people attacking, let's say, a convoy, for example. They are probably not attacking a convoy purely for political reasons. They are attacking because it is a charged atmosphere. They want to steal phones. They want to steal wristwatches. They want to steal money. So you find that there are a whole lot of reasons and there are a whole lot of dynamics to election violence. And for us as a law enforcement agent, first of all, we see those forms of violence, first of all, as crimes, and that has to be dealt with. We see them as issues that borders on the fundamental rights of citizens because they constitute breaches of other people's rights to freedom of expression, right to freedom of assembly, and all forms of rights. We also see them right to life. We also see them as acts that can reverse economic gains, developmental gains, and they impact negatively on our psyche generally. And again, if you look at election violence, you find that they could be physical violence, they could be threats, they could be intimidation, they could be targeted at the candidates themselves, they could be targeted even at security officers, they could be targeted at poll workers, INEC officials, ad hoc and permanent. They could be targeted at election observers, like my sister sitting down here, CSOs that are actively involved, political activists that are actively involved in trying to get our electoral process on the positive lane. They could be targeted at them. They could also be targeted at our national symbols, party symbols, critical infrastructures. So, and that's why if you look at the whole dynamics, you again begin to see that it's not something the police alone can handle. It certainly will require and do require a multidimensional approach. But for us, we will continue to monitor the situation. We continue to do everything we can to curb them, from early warning, from developing early warning signals to our deployment strategies, both covert and overt, and then working with relevant stakeholders.
All right, SCP Franco Bass, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Ezenwa Nwango. Is there cause for concern?
Well, for me, not so much, because I think that all you just need to be is to be an election enthusiast, and then look back a bit and see whether if you do a media content analysis for 2007, 2011, 2015, whether in significant terms you're going to see anything fundamentally different. I think the first and foremost, we deodorize crime. You know, what I mean by that is that we make it look nice by calling it electoral violence. Crime, for me, is crime, whether it's taking place on Christmas Day or it's taking place on... So the issue is for people to take out this mindset that crimes committed during election can be niced up, if you like. You know, and so people commit arson, commit battery, assault, and all of those things, and it is just shrouded under this election thing. And I think that security agencies need to lift the veil of that and deal with people and their sponsors, because people have to take vicarious responsibility for the actions of people who do things on their behalf, whether they are doing it during election or not. So for me, really, I think that violence is even receding in terms of scale. If we continue to improve the electoral process, if we continue to give level playing ground, if internal party democracy continues to get better, the people resorting to self-help will reduce. But for me, in terms of scale, I don't worry so much. I think that election is a competitive enterprise. I think that there could be some tackles, but it's important for those refereeing the process to be strict. That includes the security agencies, the EMB, and of course the citizens. But much more importantly, like I keep saying, we respect the politicians a lot. We give them this latitude to hold every other person responsible. Their actions, if you bring a politician here now, he'll be telling you about security agencies, he'll be telling you about INEC, but will never tell you about the fact that as the process is going on, they are getting more desperate. They are giving small arms to people and all of that. Those reports are coming in. Until we also focus essentially on the politicians and call them out, we will not be able to continue to minimize, like I said, the issue of violence. I don't like to call it electoral violence.
All right, now taking a cue from what Ezenwa has just said, the concern cannot be overstated, because a short while ago, I was, Kisla and I, we are discussing what happened that day, just over the weekend, where two political parties met and there was fracas, many cars burnt and what have you. So in this connection, Kabir Adamu, is there any concern?
Yes, there is concern. But having said that, at the risk of being a mouthpiece, accused of being a mouthpiece of INEC, I would say let's give INEC some kudos. Why do I say that? Unfortunately, I'm not hearing INEC telling Nigerians what it is doing to manage and mitigate the risk. Let's start by the platform that INEC has created. As far as I know, INEC has adopted what it calls an electoral risk management tool. It's the latest technology available in the world for managing risk. INEC got this tool from an International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. It's a Scandinavian-based institute. That tool gives you two platforms: risks that are within the electoral process and then risks that are outside the electoral process. And because we don't have time, but these are the drivers of electoral violence. So if the electoral umpire understands these drivers, it is hoped that it will be able to manage the outcome of whatever risk will come from that. So let's start from that point. I'm happy with what INEC has in terms of the tools it has for managing electoral violence. The second platform that INEC has created is the Interagency Consultative Committee on Electoral Security, which is, if I'm right, co-chaired by the Office of the National Security Advisor and then the IG of police. So it has provided the security agencies with the best platform to understand the risk and then to manage the risk. Now, that is the platform. In terms of operation, I know there is perhaps some disagreement between the various agencies within the Interagency Consultative Committee on Electoral Security. To address your issue directly, one of the drivers of electoral violence is the political parties themselves. How do they approach their campaigning activities, as an example? In the instance you gave, they met in a location. How and why they were allowed to meet together, because part of the functions, I think, of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Electoral Security is to ensure that this type of things don't happen. In other words, if one party is campaigning in a particular area, as much as possible, make sure the other party does not campaign in that particular area, or even if they do, provide enough security agencies in that area to ensure that there is no, fighting between the two sides. So yes, there is concern. INEC has provided the platform, but in terms of the operation of that platform, I'm not too comfortable. And I hope in the next 5 days, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Electoral Security will work hard to fine-tune some of the discrepancies that are within its operations.
All right, Kabir Adamu, thank you very much. But let me still stay with you and then, connect the comments that have been made by the other guests. Can we attempt a comparative analysis of the scale of violence that we have seen pre-voting, which is starting in 5 days' time, versus what we saw, say, in 2011 or 2015, or if we were to go back in time? I mean, as everyone says, violence is violence. ACP Frank Uba says, look, you have all kinds of dynamics playing out in the course of electioneering and all kinds of small-time crooks and rogues, taking advantage thereof. And, of course, the issues already itemized by Dr. Akiode Afolabi with regard to some of the incidents that we have seen. Plus, what you have also said, Kabir, is there tension in the air? I mean, are there frequent reports? Let's not forget, in 2015, the incumbent president was attacked in the course of a rally in Bauchi. There were several other instances, of outright arson and fisticuffs. But are we seeing that on I don't know whether the police have a blotter recording instances or incidents of violence and therefore can give us numbers. But just in terms of reportage, is the air filled with stories of foreboding and plain havoc being committed in the course of electioneering? Kabir first.
Yeah, not exactly. If you compare, we keep a database, even though I'm not claiming it's comprehensive, but at least for the purposes that we keep it, it's good enough. What we're seeing is that there is a reduction in terms of the perpetration of electoral violence in 2019 as compared to 2015, as an example. Just last week, we were analyzing the data that was available to us, and surprisingly, what came out really shockingly is that there's a particular political party whose candidates were being attacked. Nigerians have not realized that yet, unfortunately, because I've not had that narrative being spoken outside. 4 of their candidates, as at last week, just within a space of 1 week, were attacked in various parts of the country. But if you compare that scale with what happened in 2015, it's really, really low. So to answer your question directly, there is a reduction in terms of the scale of attacks. However, one key thing that has also with the trend that has emerged is the change in the type of security issues that we're monitoring. In 2015, the major issue that everybody was talking about was the terrorism in the Northeast. Currently, the issue of banditry, aka herdsmen violence, in the northwest and north central of Nigeria seems to be a major issue. There are certain states in the country that perhaps elections cannot even hold in some local governments. So that's one thing that has also emerged. But if you compare the scale of electoral violence, that's direct violence on the electoral process with what happened in 2015, I think there is a reduction.
Well, some question will go to all of you, but I could just amplify it a little bit. Now, election violence is not new in Nigeria. You know, from the 50s, the 60s, 80s, and early 90s, we've had this experience. But we're not talking about, that makes one to even reason along the line of the preponderance of election. Each time there's an election cycle, there is violence accompanying it. And we have just enumerated what happened in 2015. So I'd like to ask ASP Frank Mba to come in here. Is the political atmosphere charged to the level where you and your men like, look, we have a huge job on our hands? Is the atmosphere charged? I think that's part of the question Kingsley asked.
I think this is a period of heightened electoral activities, or political activities rather. And so if it is charged positively, in the sense that Nigerians are expectant. Nigerians are looking forward to exercising their franchise in a couple of days to come. It's not charged because anybody is expecting war. Is of course the airwaves, the newspapers, the TVs, the radios are filled with stories about political campaigns, jingles, political activities, all the nooks and crannies of the country. So, expectedly, our brains are inundated with stories and political activities. So, to that extent, is a period of heightened electioneering, heightened political campaigns, and heightened political activities. And for us as police officers, it's also a time where we are also getting very prepared for the challenges of policing the elections. If you lived in a country where football is passionately followed, you find out that if there is a major football team, for example, El Clasico or two football teams in a particular city, that
you don't want to mention Man City and Chelsea.
I don't want to talk about that because it's something that we can't understand. I can't understand what happened there. But taking us back to the subject of discussion. Yes. So if you find two great rivals playing a match, if you're a police officer in that city, you'll be so prepared. And sometimes everything about you, everything about the planning, the logistics, the deployment of the men, because is a public order thing. You don't want that. You don't want any form of hooliganism to take place on that particular day. But that doesn't mean that you're expecting warfare. That's exactly what is happening here. We are prepared. We are crossing our T's and dotting our I's and looking at our deployment strategies over and over again. We have men already out monitoring situation. We have covert deployments. We have intelligence officers out there sending information all the time. We are analyzing and we are reviewing our deployment every time. But that doesn't mean that we're expecting that the heavens will fall on Saturday. So again, it just boils down to changing the narrative. Like Ezenwa rightly said, we must also try to send out positive messages out there and take away fear from the subconsciousness of the average Nigerian. We need to let them know that this election is not about warfare, it's not about violence, it's about our citizens going out there to exercise their franchise, their right to vote and be voted for, and that we are here to make those things happen and happen seamlessly.
All right, ACP Frank Ubak, thank you very much. After the program, I'm sure you'll have enough time to talk about what happened yesterday in Man City and Chelsea. They become the new Arsenal, some would say. Well, but returning seriously now to the question of election violence. Dr. Akiyode Afolabi, let's assume that's for you to make the assumption on a comparative basis that the quantum and ferocity of election-related violence has been lower in 2019 than we experienced, say, in 2015, 2011, and much earlier. What is it that could be at play that is saying now the graph come down?
Well, well, let me first make some clarification in terms of whether we categorize electoral violence with the other violence, because I think that the reason why there is a definition for electoral violence is because the violence that you are looking at during the electoral period, they might not be different, but they are different because it becomes an electoral violence when you relate it to the period of electioneering. We must take it away from the regular violence of assaults, even when it looks like it. But when assault is instigated by a particular political process, during the electionary period, it becomes electoral violence. So I don't want to agree with Easy on the fact that, well, violence is violence, it happens every time. Yes, that is a fact. But there are violence that happen because of the season of election, and that's why the definition of electoral violence is there. Now, having said that, in terms of weighing what happened in 2015 and 2019, then my question is also about what data are we looking at? What data are we looking at? What kind of reportage are we looking at? Do we have a system where you look at, what is happening, from communities to communities, primaries to primaries, to come to... Because I would say, for example, if you compare the kind of violence that we have, particularly with women in 2015, and you compare it to 2019, I think there are more reported violence against women during this election than probably any other time. So it depends on where we are looking at it from. So, and I think that that's also one of the challenges that we have. I know that IFES does a lot of work around getting civil society organization, to monitor electoral violence, pre-elections and what have you. For example, in Osun election, we participated in that. There are violence happening in different ways, that are related to election at different, places, which oftentimes are not reported. So that's why I'm saying that. So what data are we using to measure whether violence has gone down in 2019 as opposed to 2015? Now, having said that, yeah, a lot of the development have taken place, between 2015 and 2019, because one of the things that we need to address is also the structural issues around, what we see during election period. There has been a lot of clamor for election offences tribunal, and I know that clamor has been there since 2011 up to now. That is still not yet there. There are a lot of things that we see that happen. Internal party democracy, as somebody had mentioned, vehicles, to causing electoral violence. Those issues have not been addressed. So saying that it has reduced so my own point is that I can't really see what data that we're using, to weigh the scale. But having said that, there are tools that can be used, early warning tools and what have you, that we can use to define what is happening, what we can do to mitigate violence. So I think there are a lot of work around. I was happy when I saw the poster by INEC defining electoral offences, what could amount to electoral offence on election day and whatever. I think that we need to deal with a lot of things to say, like impunity, around it. There are people who, there was violence in Lagos. A lot of journalists, were wounded, So what happened thereafter? So if we don't have answers to those issues, it will be difficult for us to say that they are no longer happening.
All right, thank you. Okay, come
I don't think the issue is about it. Let's take, first of all, 2015. By this time in 2015, first we had something hanging over that Nigeria was going to disintegrate in 2015. So a lot of people, there was migration in terms of people living, thinking that where they were staying is no longer going to be safe. And that challenge was kept the environment so tense. Many people live after the election. 1 month thereabout, they've not returned to where they were staying. So we understand that, we know that. Now, election is becoming a bit more, with the intrusion of vote buying, okay, it though negative, but you also know that what that meant was that people were more interested in getting the cash than spoiling the process. So all of those things are there. I'm not saying that I don't know that violence is taking place, but I'm talking about the attitude to which we engage these things. If you kill somebody on Christmas Day, I don't want security agencies saying it is Christmas Day. So on the basis of that, there's a way to handle it. I am saying that over a period of time, studying this trend, I see that crimes committed during election period have been treated in a way. The National Human Rights Commission did something in 2011 or so, thereabout, on calling out people who participated in electoral violence. That material is there. Nobody, you can't find, except for instance, in Canada, we had about 200 people were prosecuted. That's all you hear. You hear they were prosecuted, but at the end of the day, you don't eventually know what happened. We knew that people were arrested who claimed that they were observers in Imo State. They were arrested, paraded, and at the end of the day, till today, those issues. So I'm talking about attitude to violence, which in terms becomes the deterrent. So in terms of security provisioning, I am interested in seeing the security agencies take the issue much more seriously, not saying that, oh, it is because it's election. That's the point that I'm making. And then my colleague talked about the access, the election security. It is chaired by INEC chairman and co-chaired by the IG. In fact, in terms of election security management during elections, it is the INEC chairman. There is even I think in the 2015 amendment that positions INEC to lead that charge. And in terms of coordination, that has been the challenge. We were in Edo, for instance, and I think that is important. We were in Edo getting ready for elections. In spite of the election coordination that took place, the DIG of the police, the INEC chairman, and observers, everybody, international, were at the stakeholders meeting in Edo when a commissioner was announcing the postponement of election, of the Edo election in Abuja. It shows you lack of coordination. Those things should have been cleared. And I think going forward in the election, that level of coordination is required to be able to provision security well enough for 2019.
All right, thank you indeed for that clarification. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, with respect to categorization of electoral violence, are we also thinking about the utterances of the political leaders, which of course often, you know, hits up the polity? Are politicians not taking cognizance of the fact that there are dangers inherent in such utterances? And I want to know if such utterances has a way of stirring up, you know, violence. Because what happened that day, 2 days ago, there was no, we learned that one of the vice presidential candidates of a party was also trapped, you know, in that mayhem that happened. So what is the contribution of politicians towards, you know, stirring up this violence, even when they did not give it any directive to go and carry out, you know, such crimes? But what comes out from them goes a long way. We'd like to find out from Mba, is there any point where an utterance, somebody could be taken up for making utterances, you know, that can, you know, stir up violence?
Okay. Before I answer that question, let me just weigh in on the discussion about the labeling or categorization of these crimes that happen around this area, around this time. Somehow, I will be taking a mid-course between the positions of these two discussants. My reason is this. Clearly, for us, electoral violence generically is just a crime. Okay? And so, when they occur, we look at them, this is arson, this is assault, this is murder, this is attempted murder, this is unlawful possession of firearm, this is malicious damage to property, and so on and so forth. However, in the course of investigation, the moment we are able to establish motive, and we discover, for instance, that this crime was committed in pursuance or in an attempt to advance a political cause or a political gain, or in an attempt to intimidate and reduce the potential of the other person from actually achieving a certain political goal, then it begins to get the label of electoral offense. And particularly, if that crime falls within those crimes that are clearly defined within the Electoral Act, again, it begins to wear the garment and the look and the label of an electoral offense. And so, having said that, I can return to your question. And you were talking about
utterances of political leaders that can...
Clearly, the challenge we usually have here is drawing a line between what the Constitution provides, the freedom of speech, and then what constitutes an offense. But for even a little baby, when you hear a hate speech, you will know. And so when politicians make speeches or issue statements that are capable of hitting the polity, that are capable of stirring up emotions negatively, that are capable of pushing a young, probably not too educated person to take up arms or begin to indulge or engage in violent acts, then that's clearly a crime. We're working on this, but incidentally, there's so much we are doing behind the scene. There are a lot of constructive engagements that we're also carrying out. Because sometimes citizens expect that for everything that happened, the police should just weigh in and carry out an arrest immediately. But sometimes we do a whole lot of work behind the scene. And that's why the sitting IGP, Mohamed Adamu, has repeatedly advised his commissioners at the state level to engage in constructive dialogue with politicians from all divides. And we're doing a whole lot behind the scene to help to manage challenges that has to do with hate speeches, challenges that has to do with fake news, challenges that has to do with clearly inflammatory statements that are capable of derailing what we're currently all trying to do.
All right, ACP Frank Ubah, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we're taking a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll take some tweets and then continue with the conversation. All right, welcome back. And I said, good morning, Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's take some of the tweets that we have now and continue with the conversation. Mike Ayankwo tweets, we must learn from history that violence doesn't solve any problem, but instead exacerbates it. Not only that lives and properties are lost, democracy can be truncated. Law enforcement agencies must deal decisively with anyone that causes violence.
Now from Amos Julius, he says, let our leaders have the interests of this country at heart. That's what is important.
Ibrahim Moduaji tweets, former President Goodluck Jonathan said, and I quote, my ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. This should be a guiding principle for politicians. Elections should have been seen as a do-or-die affair.
From Festus Akimboewa, this election is crucial to the progress of Nigeria, and it must not be a do-or-die election. I urge Nigerians to go out and vote without violence. Our tribal and religious leaders must act as honest brokers and should not promote one candidate over another.
All right, Kieran, let's turn now to Kabir. Kabir, well, obviously, I mean, on a comparative basis, the impression will be that, fine, the scale of intimidation and violence in 2019 appears less than that of 2015. But There are other factors that are played out now in terms of the security matrix. You were talking earlier about some of those locations where elections might just be a challenge, considering the security situation around the country. What is it that we should worry about with regard to the other elements that could impact on the peaceful conduct of the elections?
Okay, several polls have been conducted. I mean, one of the most prominent ones that has really gone wide in circulation is the one by Clean Foundation. It's a non-governmental organization, and it did a survey. What came out topmost as concerning to Nigerians is vote buying. The other factors include, the perception that the security forces are biased. They are favoring a particular candidate. There are other pros around the integrity of INEC itself, whether it will conduct a free and fair elections. So yeah, there are several factors in that element. But from my standpoint as a security risk management expert, there are, I would say, two things that have really come out and that are worrying me. They're keeping me awake at night. The rhetorics of politicians. Kirian mentioned that in one of the questions he asked. I feel what some politicians are doing is throwing away the baby with the water. Some of their statements, if you ask me, are treasonable statements and should have been charged like that at this stage. I also worry about the possibility of interference by foreign elements. This happened to the biggest democracy in the world, or rather the most advanced democracy in the world, the US government. During the last election, the process was interfered by another country. At that time, intelligence bodies within the world believed that there were only 2 platforms that had that capability. As at today, I went to a conference last year in the US, 24 platforms were identified as having the capacity and capability to influence the outcome of elections. How do they do that? Through social media. You see posts. Is that happening in Nigeria? Yes. A lot of fake news being posted in circulation, affecting all the 2 candidates on different platforms on social media. So there are several elements that are playing out there that are concerning, but the 2 most important ones for me, as far as I'm concerned, is the rhetorics by politicians and then the possibility of foreign interference within the outcome of the elections. And to put all of this together, what matters at the end of the day is the perception by the generality of Nigerians whether the process was credible or not. If there is a perception that the process is credible, then I think we would see less possibility of a post-election violence. Because let's remember, in 2011, that was the killer, post-election violence. It is not pre-election, it's not during election, it is post-election. And why will there be violence? If there is a perception that the process was manipulated. In other words, it wasn't credible. Our security agencies, considering this factor, what steps are they taking? I worry because they themselves have been accused of being biased, quote and unquote. So I'll go back to my earlier statement that INEC has provided the platform for this process to be managed in a free and transparent manner. So I think that is the key. Perhaps in the conclusion of our discussion, we can talk about better coordination, budgeting, financing of that process to ensure it's able to manage the risk, which we're anticipating, unfortunately.
Well, I think Kabir has actually raised some germane points with respect to this conversation, and that's interference, foreign interference, for instance. But unfortunately, we're not using completely electronically driven elections. So hacking may not actually be necessary for anybody who wants to interfere into our election. Now, Dr. Abiola, Frank Mba enumerated some forms of violence requiring multi-dimensional approach. And from your experience as an observer, what do you foresee on Saturday when this election begins?
Well, on Saturday, where we hope everything will be peaceful anyway, yeah, but we need to also learn from past experiences, what happened during the elections and all of that. Whether we like it or not, there is a perception that there that this election is going to be highly competitive. It looks like one of those elections where you cannot determine by sitting down in your sitting room who is going to win the election, given all what we have been saying, building up towards that election. And when you have such situation, a lot of people get very edgy. People tend to watch, one another, more than ever before, and they become much more suspicious, of one another. And in instances like this too, you find a lot of plans, by politicians, to also derail the process so that they win the election at all costs. So I think that we need to secure the votes more, or the actors in the election processes. The observers must be able to do their work to ensure that when they see something, they quickly say something, so that we don't leave issues without responding, as quickly as possible. The security officials need to do what they can do to gain the confidence of the people, because there seems to be a burden, that it's being carried on from the Osun election in terms of how neutral the security agencies are. So I think it's very important that we need to also want politicians to ensure that they make the election day a freedom. Voters to, must also be one to ensure that they do what they have to do to make the election right for that day. So yes, we should secure the ballot boxes from being snatched. We should do everything. And I think that in Osun election, the fact that the Osun Rec was coming out to, talk about some of these issues, and vote buying and things that can, kickstart violence, I think that really helped. So we should expect a lot of that coming from INEC, before these elections.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Akiyode Afolabi. Ezewa Nwangu, well, the issue of the security agencies has arisen. Can the security agencies be trusted, or how can they win public trust so that the perception doesn't linger that they are biased?
It's difficult, but I'll use the anecdote that the SCP used about watching professional management of football, security management of football in Europe. When you watch those matches, you will see that most of the policemen are facing the crowd. And even when a goal is scored, they are not part of the excitement for the goal. They face what they're doing. But in our country, we have seen policemen jump into the field in excitement so that difference is important. So what are people talking about? It's just that insistence that people should be professional, people should do their work, and the welfare of the men who will do this work should be taken care of ahead of time, and let it be publicly known that has happened, manifestly known to all that it has happened. I know that there are issues around how they get their stipends, in terms of whether it is paid to the bank, whether some of them are in banks that have whatever. But I'm more interested in seeing a more professional police, a police that is also, listening more to INEC in terms of how to engage with these issues during the election. That for me is critical. But I think for the elections, the bigger threat will be ignorance and mischief. Ignorance, because as one who has been traveling around the country, organizing trainings and all of that, what I find most intriguing is that you see people who talk authoritatively on elections, and you ask them, in particular case, at the risk of being modest, I asked, have you seen the Electoral Act? And I said, if you've seen, please, I'm not putting just raise up your hand. And I was shocked. Seeing, I'm not talking about reading some parts. And so many people who talk authoritatively about elections have no understanding of the terms, the words, that are even used in this period and what it means. So I think it will be important to also, even the media, and I keep saying that the media, during elections, we throw out everybody into the field. Those who cover aviation, those who cover transport. I don't know the level of training that takes place internally before they go out. So their reportage of events has to also be in the understanding of the laws and the rules that is guiding the process, so that what they put out there, people can understand it. Because if you say, for instance, margin of lead, issues around margin of lead, it came up in Osun. Not many people, including media people, could understand that margin of lead issue, and so you see that the agenda setting around it became very confusing, because many people who ordinarily should know do not know. Then those who know also, but choose, and that is coming out from the pulpits as well. You know, people masking their political opinions as spiritual instructions. Those are also very, very significant in dealing with violence, because when ignorance parades as authority and sits in a position where it's telling people this is the correct thing, and many people are not interested in interrogating and finding out whether what that person is saying, that the person even understands those issues. I think that is critical going forward. The media will have very important role, and for violence as well. I've been looking at issues. I said, look, media ownership colors how people receive the media as well. Because in many places, people know who owns, or think they know who owns what. So if you come from a particular media organization and you are reporting events in a particular area, they don't see you as a professional who is coming to report elections. They see you as representing, as an agent of the owner of your media, and that in itself puts you in a very difficult situation. So we need to put those things out, that if, for instance, you work in a particular media organization and you know that there are places you shouldn't go to cover election because people will not understand, and that becomes media prevented from observing election. When you hear media prevented from observing, it does not always mean that all media were prevented. It could be a particular media, but what will come in the pages of newspaper is media prevented from observing elections.
Very salient points you have raised there. I can say, when the Osun election was concluded or was declared inconclusive, and rescheduled for a runoff, many of us didn't understand what that meant, just as he raised. Even those who should know failed to accept, that they have the knowledge that if such a situation arises, there should be a reschedule of election. Thank you indeed. At this point, I'd like ASP Frank Mbah to come in, because he...
ACP, you keep demoting him.
No, see... All right. LCP, Frank Mbah, as with some points. One has to do with the assuring that the stipends meant for the police that will be in the field on that day, that they have gotten this money, is very, very important. Because that will go a long way in ensuring that your men do not look out for money on that day from politicians or other individuals. Now, you tell us about that. And again, I know the police is not alone in the entire security apparatus that will be going out for this election. And you are in the lead. Tell us more.
Okay, first of all, let me deal with the concerns that were raised, and so many other citizens have probably raised about our capacity to police the electoral process. I want to say this. From the very first time IGP Mohammed Adamu came to power, the first statement he issued is that the Nigerian police force under his watch will be very professional in handling everything concerning these elections. He assured Nigerians that we will provide a level playing field for all political actors, and we will be politically neutral, and we will discharge our responsibilities in accordance with the Constitution, the Police Act, and the Electoral Acts, and all other ancillary legislations. And the truth is, once we do this, once we are politically neutral, once we provide a level playing field, once we respect the content of the Electoral Acts, once we respect the fundamental rights of everyone that will be participating in this election, we've we've done our bit and we've done our part. On the issue of the welfare of our officers that will be deployed during this election, of course, I appreciate the concerns of Nigerians. But again, the IGP he stands in local parentis to all police officers in Nigeria. He's like the father of all of us. And so the welfare, the well-being of the police officers are utmost, are top priority to him. And like I've said in some other fora, you can't be more Catholic than the Pope. You can't love the policemen more than the IGP does. And in this particular election, we've done everything that needed to be done. Our personnel that will be deployed for this election will get their allowances before they arrive their duty post. We're using their salary accounts. There will be no third-party interference. Monies has been budgeted. The budget department has made all relevant provisions and arrangements, and they will receive their money directly in their salary account, perhaps 24 hours even before they arrive at their duty post. So we are committed, and in fact irrevocably committed, to delivering on our mandate in this election. And if we do all this, we would have tackled some of the drivers of violence, some of those things that politicians take advantage of in trying to either corrupt the system, corrupt the policing system. And we also believe that as our brothers and sisters from other sister security agencies, from the DSS, from the customs, the immigration, the prisons, the civil defense, the federal road safety, they are also keying and following the same pattern as the lead agency is actually doing. But again, we must also be looking at long-term strategies in managing electoral violence. So issues like internal democracy, these are things that we must continue to remind politicians. They must threaten internal democracy. We must deal with those issues that make violence, particularly at intra-party level, to be pronounced. We must begin to deal with them and deal with so many other issues on the long run.
All right, thank you very much. Kabir Adamo, very briefly, what could possibly go wrong? And so what should be done?
Well, my major concern really is coordination of the security functions. According to the ISS guidelines, there is a concentric cycle of security. The outer cycle that will have armed protection, then the inner cycle that will also have armed protection, and then at the polling booth that there won't be armed protection. I'm worried about communication between these three cycles. I'm also very worried about the awareness of Nigerians regarding this security arrangement. So what can go wrong? INEC has not done enough capacity building and awareness for Nigerians to understand these functions that have been provided for the security.
All right, thank you. We still have 4 days away, and I'm sure that if there are discrepancies along the line, they would have been corrected before we get there. For now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to appreciate you one more time for being part of our conversation this morning. ACP Frank Mba, First Public Relations Officer, it's been nice hosting you this morning on the program. But we may call you back again before Saturday anyway to talk more on this.
It's always a pleasure to serve.
All right. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this very important topic.
Thank you, Kirian. It's my pleasure to be here.
And Ezenwa Nwago, the Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. It's been a pleasure having you this morning. And of course, Dr. Abiola Akeode Afolabi, the Chairperson, Transition Monitoring Group. Thank you very much indeed for reaching us today from Abuja and not Lagos as usual. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
All right, now let's... And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadala. Do have a lovely day ahead of you.